President-elect Donald Trump has announced plans to impose a 25% tariff on all Canadian imports, citing concerns over illegal immigration and drug trafficking, particularly fentanyl, across the US-Canada border. He stated these tariffs would remain until Canada addresses these issues to his administration's satisfaction. In response, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau criticized the proposed tariffs, emphasizing their potential to harm both economies by increasing consumer prices and disrupting trade. Trudeau also dismissed Trump's suggestion of Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state as a distraction from the real issues at hand. The Canadian government has vowed to retaliate, and we'll be discussing this in detail in this video. Historically, the US and Canada have shared a robust trade relationship, with bilateral trade in goods and services totaling approximately $900 billion annually. The two countries are each other's largest trading partners, deeply integrated through agreements like the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. Previous tariff implementations, such as those on steel and aluminium in 2018, led to retaliatory measures and strained relations, though they were eventually resolved through negotiations. The proposed tariffs have raised concerns among business leaders and economists about potential disruptions to supply chains, increased costs for consumers, and negative impacts on financial markets. The Canadian dollar has already experienced depreciation amid these tensions, reflecting investor apprehension. Canada, however, is not the only country affected by these tariffs. President-elect Donald Trump has repeatedly used social media platforms like Truth Social to announce sweeping tariff measures against various countries. These plans target key U.S. trading partners, including Canada, Mexico, China, and the European Union, with stated goals of addressing trade imbalances, illegal immigration, and national security concerns. In late November 2024, Trump declared a 25% tariff on all imports from Mexico and Canada, justified as a response to illegal immigration and the influx of drugs, particularly fentanyl, entering the United States. Trump has vowed that the tariffs will remain until Mexico and Canada take concrete action to address these issues. His tariff plans also include an additional 10% levy on all Chinese imports as part of a broader effort to reduce trade deficits and curb the flow of illicit substances. Trump has long criticized China for its trade practices, including allegations of intellectual property theft and currency manipulation. In 2018, similar tariffs led to a sharp increase in costs for U.S. businesses and consumers, and analysts predict the new round of tariffs could have similar effects. The European Union is also in Trump's crosshairs. In a recent Truth Social post, Trump accused the EU of engaging in unfair trade practices, such as imposing higher tariffs on U.S. goods than the U.S. does on European imports. He proposed a 25% tariff on key EU exports to the U.S., including automobiles, wine, and luxury goods. The EU is one of the largest trading partners of the United States, with bilateral trade in goods and services exceeding $1 trillion annually. Germany, in particular, could be heavily impacted, as its automotive industry relies on exporting high-value vehicles to the U.S. European leaders, including German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, have warned of retaliatory measures if these tariffs are enacted. In addition to tariffs targeting specific countries, Trump has floated the idea of imposing a 100% tariff on imports from BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. This unprecedented measure, if enacted, could destabilize global trade, affecting sectors ranging from agriculture to technology. Economists warn that such tariffs could provoke widespread retaliatory actions, leading to global economic instability. Canada is preparing an extensive tariff retaliation plan should President-elect Donald Trump impose 25% levies on Canadian goods. Unlike the targeted counter-tariffs during the 2018 trade dispute, this response could encompass nearly all U.S. products sold to Canada. In 2018, Canada's retaliatory tariffs focused on specific items like bourbon whiskey from Republican strongholds. This time, similar products, such as Florida orange juice, may face tariffs again alongside a broader list of U.S. exports. Government officials, speaking anonymously, indicated the aim is to match U.S. tariffs dollar for dollar. If Trump enacts sweeping tariffs on Canadian exports, complete value matching might be infeasible. However, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's administration is exploring all options to maximize economic pressure on U.S. exporters while avoiding a full-scale trade war. Trump's recent remarks threatening Canada with economic force and suggesting it should become the 51st U.S. state have caused backlash in Canada. Trudeau countered these statements, labeling them as distractions from the economic harm of Trump's tariffs. Proposals that could increase consumer prices have sparked significant debate as Canada, the largest national buyer of U.S. goods, imported $320 billion worth in the first 11 months of last year, closely trailing the $341 billion purchased by the EU. Retaliatory tariffs, however, would also hurt Canada's economy, potentially reducing GDP by up to 5.6% over several years if full retaliation is implemented, according to economists. Canada is considering export taxes on key commodities such as oil, uranium, and potash, aiming to exert economic pressure on the U.S. by targeting sectors heavily reliant on Canadian exports. As a major supplier of crude oil to the United States, with energy products constituting approximately 30% of its exports to the U.S., Canada's early January 2025 record of 4.42 million barrels per day highlights U.S. refineries' dependence on Canadian oil. Imposing export taxes on oil could disrupt this supply chain, potentially leading to increased energy costs for American consumers and businesses. Canada is also striving to become the world's largest uranium producer, with companies like Cameco planning significant production increases to meet rising global demand for nuclear energy. The U.S. heavily relies on Canadian uranium for its nuclear power plants, and export taxes could impact the availability and cost of this critical resource, affecting energy production and national security considerations. As a leading producer of potash, a key fertilizer component, Canada plays a vital role in supporting U.S. agriculture. Export taxes on potash could lead to higher costs for American farmers, potentially increasing food prices and affecting agricultural sector profitability. The metals industry, frequently targeted in past trade disputes, also remains a potential focus. While Canada's aluminium exports, led by companies like Rio Tinto and Alcoa, are likely targets, the steel sector has seen less criticism. Notably, Cleveland-Cliffs Inc., a major U.S. steelmaker, recently acquired Canada's Stelco Holdings Inc., potentially influencing trade dynamics and complicating the impact of new tariffs or export taxes. Implementing export taxes on these commodities poses risks to Canada's economy, given the significant role of energy products in its export portfolio. However, such measures could serve as a strategic response to U.S. tariffs, aiming to prompt negotiations and mitigate the adverse effects of a potential trade war. Former Canadian trade negotiator Steve Verheuel suggested that export taxes could be a tool in negotiations if the U.S. proceeds with broad tariffs. Trudeau's government is weighing whether to release a list of potential tariffs before Trump's inauguration, a decision dependent on clarity around Trump's trade policies, which remain uncertain. While advocating to avoid a trade war, Canadian officials are preparing to respond decisively if necessary. With both nations facing potential economic fallout, the stakes in this escalating trade conflict remain high, as the future of a $900 billion bilateral trade relationship hangs in the balance. The U.S. tariff policy, particularly the proposed 25% tariffs on Canadian imports, has faced significant criticism for its potential to harm both economies. Analysts warn that such tariffs could lead to increased consumer prices, disrupted supply chains, and economic downturns in both countries. A report by Oxford Economics suggests that these tariffs could push Canada into a recession by mid-2025, with GDP falling by 2.5% and inflation surging to 7.2%. In light of these potential repercussions, there are indications that Trump may reconsider the breadth of his tariff plans. Reports suggest he is contemplating narrowing the scope of the tariffs to focus on critical imports vital to U.S. national or economic security, such as those related to defense, medical supplies, and energy production. This shift could be seen as an attempt to mitigate negative economic impacts and avoid a full-scale trade war with Canada. However, Trump has publicly denied plans to scale back the tariffs, emphasizing their importance for America's economic prosperity. This contradiction underscores the ongoing uncertainty surrounding U.S. trade policy and its implications for both nations. Canada and the United States have evolved over centuries, transitioning from early conflicts to becoming one of the most deeply integrated and cooperative bilateral partnerships globally. This complex relationship spans economics, culture, security, and diplomacy, influencing not only the two nations but also global affairs. The early history of U.S.-Canada relations was marked by significant tensions. After the American Revolution, approximately 50,000 Loyalists who remained faithful to the British Crown migrated to British-controlled Canada, creating a divide between the two regions. The War of 1812 further strained relations, with invasions occurring on both sides. Despite the conflict, the Treaty of Ghent in 1814 ended hostilities and established a framework for peaceful coexistence. The Rush-Bagot Agreement of 1817 further solidified this peace by demilitarizing the Great Lakes, setting a precedent for diplomatic solutions that would define much of their future relationship. During the 19th century, U.S.-Canada relations were characterized by both territorial disputes and economic cooperation. The Oregon Treaty of 1846 peacefully resolved competing claims in the Pacific Northwest, marking a significant step toward establishing clear boundaries and reducing tensions. The Reciprocity Treaty of 1854 further strengthened their economic ties, allowing for free trade in natural resources. This agreement significantly boosted bilateral trade, with Canadian exports to the U.S. increasing by over 40% during its operation. By the late 19th century, Canada was exporting significant quantities of timber and furs to the U.S., while American goods accounted for nearly half of Canada's total imports. The two world wars brought Canada and the U.S. into closer alignment, particularly in military and economic matters. During World War II, the establishment of the Permanent Joint Board on Defense in 1940 formalized their collaboration in ensuring continental security. This partnership deepened during the post-war era as both nations prioritized economic integration. The Canada-US Automotive Products Agreement, also known as the Auto Pact of 1965, was a landmark accord that integrated the automotive industries of the two countries, paving the way for billions of dollars in cross-border trade annually. By the mid-20th century, the US had firmly established itself as Canada's largest trading partner. Canada supplied vital raw materials, including oil and natural gas, while importing American machinery and consumer goods. These developments laid the groundwork for the more comprehensive trade agreements that would follow in subsequent decades. The relationship between the two nations reached new heights with the implementation of the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement in 1988, followed by the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, in 1994. These agreements removed many trade barriers and significantly increased economic integration. Between 1990 and 2000, bilateral trade grew exponentially, surpassing $500 billion annually by the early 2000s. By this time, the U.S. accounted for over 70% of Canada's total trade, underscoring the deep economic interdependence of the two nations. Despite their strong partnership, trade disputes occasionally arose. Disagreements over issues such as softwood lumber and dairy products highlighted the challenges of managing such a significant trading relationship. However, both nations generally found ways to resolve these disputes diplomatically, ensuring the continuation of a mutually beneficial partnership. In recent years, the US-Canada relationship has faced new challenges. The Trump administration's imposition of tariffs on Canadian steel, 25%, and aluminium, 10%, in 2018 strained relations, leading to retaliatory measures from Canada targeting iconic U.S. exports such as bourbon whiskey and orange juice. These tensions culminated in the renegotiation of NAFTA into the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, aiming to modernize trade rules while maintaining the strong economic ties that define the US-Canada partnership. Canada's agreement under the USMCA in 2020, despite various hurdles, underscores the strength of trade between the two nations, which boasts an annual value of approximately $900 billion. Canada serves as the largest foreign supplier of energy to the United States, providing 16% of its crude oil imports, while the U.S. exports substantial amounts of machinery, electronics, and agricultural products to Canada. This exchange highlights the deep economic interconnectedness between the two countries, which extends into tourism and cultural exchanges. Annually, around 20 million Canadians visit the U.S., while 15 million Americans travel to Canada, contributing billions of dollars to both economies. However, the tariff threats issued by the United States under President-elect Donald Trump raised significant concerns worldwide, targeting key trading partners such as Canada, Mexico, China, the European Union, and even the BRICS nations. Framed as strategies to protect American industries, curb illegal immigration, and address trade imbalances, these measures introduced a more complex and potentially risky economic landscape. Retaliation from affected countries, like Canada considering export taxes on critical commodities such as oil and potash, the EU potentially targeting iconic American products, and Mexico contemplating tariffs on U.S. agricultural exports, posed risks to the U.S. economy. Consequences included increased consumer prices, disrupted supply chains, and strained relations with long-standing allies, potentially overshadowing any intended benefits of the tariffs. Moreover, escalating trade tensions threatened to harm the global economy, reducing trade volumes and triggering widespread instability. The lingering question was whether Trump would follow through on sweeping tariff promises, use them as a negotiation tactic, or abandon the threats altogether. Historically, tariffs have often been employed as leverage in trade disputes, yet their implementation frequently leads to unintended consequences that outweigh their benefits. Only time would reveal whether Trump's bold approach would yield meaningful reforms in global trade relations or inflict self-damage on the U.S. economy and its global standing. That's all for today's video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you'll be notified whenever we upload new content. We've also suggested some videos on the screen that you might find interesting, so be sure to check them out. Thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video.